and welcome to the second day of HLF and the second session of Storyweavers. So this is a stream where we invite storytellers. They may have written their own books, or they may be speaking from experience, or they may have stories to narrate. So it is a wide, diverse group of people who come and who have different stories to tell. And we have introduced a new segment. This is the third edition, the third year. It's called Hyderabad Stories. So Hyderabadis come and tell their stories in this segment. And today we have three eminent personalities. We have Professor Ismat Mehdi, Danish Majid, and Mr. Lokeshwar Paravastu, who is here also. And this will be followed by readings on Kashmiri stories by the Little Theatre of Hyderabad. So that's the program for today. So you can stay right here till 4:30, till it's all done. So I would like to introduce you to Professor Ismat Mehdi, who has a special place in our hearts. She's from my university, English and Foreign Languages. I had the good fortune of being a student there and also teaching while she was still working there. But her qualifications and expertise go way beyond that. She is a polyglot. She has taught French, German in Osmania University and Arabic at FLU. And she has lectured and written on the history and culture of India, on the Middle East, on Sufism, women in Islam. She was the founder of the Sarvodaya Trust and director of Maulana Azad Center for Indian Culture in Cairo. And she has written many books. The latest, which is called I Almost Wasn't. So she's going to talk about her experiences and her family, who is closely related to the freedom struggle of India, actually. So over to you, ma'am.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks to Uma. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear? जरा देखते रहो पहुंचना ऊपर तक आवाज Okay? Yeah. So good afternoon once again, and it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks to Uma, I am going to talk about my book, which is called I Almost Wasn't. So this is about Hyderabad. Now, Hyderabad has changed, not only in its topography. The rocks and all have gone, and now there are very high-rise buildings. So Hyderabad is a different city, actually, from what we knew. So, more importantly, the culture of Hyderabad has changed. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the way I grew up in Hyderabad and how things are so different now. Now, this book was written mainly for my grandchildren, but I find that my grandchildren are not interested at all in the old Hyderabad. So it is people who knew me and who grew up, sort of our contemporaries. So it has more of an appeal to them rather than to my grandchildren for whom I wrote this book. Maybe when they grow up, they will read about Hyderabad, but not now. So the young people have no idea of how we, as extended families, lived in Hyderabad, because now the families are linear, and so they're very different. So I have said how we lived and what we learned from them. Now, a section of my memoirs deals with early schooling, then later on with higher studies. I went abroad to study languages, and I learned several languages. In 3 years, I learned 3 different foreign languages. So I was a bit timid by nature. So learning a language, you have to be bold, you have to pronounce every word. So that took a little time, but with my uncle, who was my mentor, that bridge was crossed fairly easily. So in the end, I could pass as a passable speaker in all these languages. So it was logical, therefore, that I would teach them. After being married with 3 children, and we were in remote areas of Andhra, but even then, I thought I would take up teaching. But before that, my experience in Baghdad led me to, after an advertisement in AIR, All India Radio New Delhi, led me to the portals of AIR, and there I started broadcasting in Arabic. So this was a very good period to be in Delhi because it was 1973, and there the petrol prices had quadrupled, and Arabic, which was a very neglected language, suddenly became quite important. And we were asked even to sit at the grand tables of negotiations. When all the foreign ministers of OPEC came, we were there, we meaning Arabic and Persian. Persian also was neglected. So in AIR, we had to share one table. Arabic in the morning, then Chinese. The Chinese supervisor chaired my table. Then like that we had to do, but after 1973, we got our own tables. Okay. So any life story begins with lineage. So I started my account with my paternal grandfather. He was treating the Sultan of Zanzibar because the Sultan had fallen very ill and they couldn't find any doctor from abroad, from foreign doctors, to treat him. So they came to Hyderabad. So they called this doctor and he went all the way to Zanzibar from Hyderabad. There he discovered that the British were poisoning the Sultan because Sultan had radical views. He was poisoning the Sultan, so he started giving him antidote to the poison and therefore controlled the poison. He did that a couple of times, but the British were very clever and they really upped the dose, and so sadly the Sultan died and my grandfather also died with him. Now the book tells about my maternal side. Maternal side lived next to the Naidus, and I'd asked my granddaughter to read a little.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah. So this is from the first chapter of the book called I Almost Wasn't. My grandparents lived next to Sarojini Naidu's family, which was increasingly being drawn into the vortex of India's freedom struggle. With mentors such as G.K. Gokhale, M.A. Jinnah, and Gandhi, Sarojini soon became the women's face of the battle, urging women across the nation to join Gandhi's non-cooperation movement. It was inevitable that Sarojini Naidu's politics would influence her friends, foremost among them the Hassan family. Amir Hassan's sons, who had already been exposed to liberal ideas in Europe, readily took to the idealism of the nationalist leaders. The Hassan family was the first to respond when Gandhi called for the boycott of British goods. They made a bonfire of their expensive imported clothes. High up in the residency, which was not far from the Hassan residence in King Koti, the British resident saw plumes of smoke rising from the nearby residence. Upon inquiry, he was told the Hassans were burning imported British clothes. Enraged, the resident called Nana Baba and rebuked him, asking him to stop this nonsense. Nana Baba, in turn, asked his wife to restrain their children. "This is my house. My father gave it to me," Nana said. "My children are free to do as they please. You know where the gate is located." Even today, those words echo loudly in family history. The first of their children to join Mahatma Gandhi's ashram was my uncle, Badrul Hassan. Impressed by his flair for writing, Mahatma Gandhi made him editor of the Young India Journal in 1925. Among his more notable works was the drink and drug evil in India, for which Mahatma Gandhi wrote the foreword. Badru Mamu was hounded by fanatics who threatened to kill him and throw his body into the Musi River. Whenever Badrul visited Sabarmati Ashram, Gandhi would send his secretary Pyarelal to receive him and see him off at the station.
So the family had a rough time because they were nationalists, and this was the time of the Nizam. And the Nizam was siding with the British, and here they were against the British. But my rebellious grandmother sent her children to Germany to study and not to England. So they all went one after another to Germany for higher studies. Now, detailed account in my book follows about the youngest son, Abid Hassan. He was in Berlin and he joined Netaji there as interpreter and as private secretary to him. Now, Abid fulfilled every role that was assigned to him. So Netaji started to trust him more and more. And when finally the time came for him to leave Germany and go east towards Japan to seek help from the Japanese to fight the British, he had to go somehow to Germany. So wanted to take a plane, but then the plane couldn't go over enemy territory. So he went by ship. Now, ship also was difficult, so the Germans provided him with a submarine. So in the submarine, Netaji took Abid Hassan with him as his only companion, because there was no place for more people. So Abid Hassan was there with him for the whole of 3 months in the submarine, very congested, couldn't stand, couldn't lie down, had to sit up and eat the food that the Germans were giving, and that was also not very palatable. But finally, they managed. And on the submarine, they discussed what India should be after independence. So for that, they had to get, first of all, some help from the Japanese. So in the submarine, they would discuss with one another, Abid Hassan and Netaji. So Netaji would talk to Abid Hassan and say, ask him a question, or Tojo would answer. So this conversation between Tojo, the Japanese king, and Netaji, how he would convince Tojo to give support for the national struggle. Now, the idea to write about the Azad Hind Fauj is to tell young people how our seniors sacrificed, what all they did to join the national, and how many of them were imprisoned, and how many of them just gave their all for the future of India. Now, many young people do not realize what all went through to get this independence that we have. So I hope that this book will make some impression on them. So Netaji didn't just want to create an army that could take on the might of the British Empire. He wanted to create a sense of emotional unity among the soldiers. Now, the soldiers had come from different faiths, and they would greet each other in the mornings in different ways. Some would say namaste, some would say salam, some would say Sat Sri Akal, and all of them with hand and head gestures. Now, Netaji did not want that. He wanted one uniform greeting for all Indians. So he told Abid, you go and see what is coming up. Try and tell them to find one common greeting. So he found that Jai Hindustan was coming up as a common greeting. So he told Netaji that it is Jai Hindustan. Netaji said, no, it's too long. Shorten it. So Abid said, okay, we can say Jai Hind. So Jai Hind became ultimately the national slogan. Now today, every official function ends with Jai Hind. Whether it is said by the president or the prime minister or the common soldier, the Jawans, they all say Jai Hind. Abid Hassan's contribution is forgotten, but the fact remains that with every Jai Hind, we are remembering him. One of the highlights of my life was being deputed to Egypt as director of the Indian Cultural Center in the Embassy of India, Cairo.
Chapter 7, Egypt. Each Friday, I would go sightseeing to Pharaonic, Coptic, or Islamic sites. The Ministry of Tourism gave a few passes to embassies for free entry to monuments. When visitors came from India, I showed them around Cairo. When Ambassador Ghosh's brother Shankar Ghosh, an IAS officer, visited Cairo, I offered to be his guide. He told the ambassador, "Ismat is a very good guide. Why don't you take her when you go sightseeing?" We were stopped while entering Ibn Talun's mosque. I showed the officer on duty my visitor's pass, but he demanded that I show him the card that professional guides carried. I was not a guide, I explained. I was simply showing these historical sites to the ambassador. The officer became argumentative, insisting that I was a guide. Ambassador Ghosh wondered how I could be mistaken for an Egyptian guide, but I felt quite flattered. I was frequently visited by friends and family, and I enjoyed welcoming them to my life in Cairo. When Maliha came, we decided to go on an Oberoi cruise. Seeing the tombs on the Nile in the mornings and partying at nights, we made the most of the delightful cruise, after which we flew back to Cairo. My driver, Muhammad Ali, picked us up and gave us terrible news. Naguib Mahfouz had been attacked, his jugular vein stabbed. He was hospitalized and in critical care. Mahfouz had been boarding his car when he was attacked, and it was his luck that the doctor friend was driving the vehicle. The doctor immediately pushed a tourniquet in the wound, checked the bleeding, and drove to the hospital in 7 minutes, saving Mahfouz's life. We were stunned and petrified. We knew that terrorism was on the rise and tourists targeted, but such a ghastly attack on a person who symbolized Egypt could be considered an attack on Egypt itself. At our weekly meeting, it was decided that I should call on Mahfouz and take a bouquet of flowers. I said our flowers would pale compared to those presented by the US and France, and I proposed soap instead. I had very good sandalwood soap from India, but my idea lacked support. When I persisted, the ambassador acquiesced. "Okay, take your soap, but with a pretty bouquet." The hospital corridor leading to Mahfouz's room was lined with photographers and news reporters who turned their attention to me when I came in wearing a sari. They dashed towards me and asked, "So, what is India sending the Ustaz?" "Sandal," I said. Newspapers the following day carried the headline, "India sends perfumed greetings of Sandal to the Ustaz." My sandalwood had won the day.
The book mainly describes how life has changed in Hyderabad, where family discipline was all important. We had meals at regular times. They were freshly made. They were frugal and they were healthy. There was plenty of space for sports, especially local sports like gilli danda and lawn part, etc. When I tell my children that I used to fly kites and take part in fighting them with other kites, they hardly believe me. So my memories are written mainly for youngsters living abroad, but as I told you, they're not interested. Many have asked me why I wrote these memoirs. To begin with, why did I write? As I explained in the book, it was not my idea at all, but a series of articles in the Hindu carried lives of people like Shankar Melkote and others. How I came to be included, I do not know. But my friends were impressed, and they said, you have to write about your life. You have to write. I said, it's presumptuous of me. What should I write? So they said, write 60 pages. 60 pages. And somebody said, write 3 pages a day. So soon your book will be over. But when I started, I had to think a lot about what had to go into the book. Because I did not keep diaries, I did not keep dates. But I kept my grandchildren in mind, and so I had to do some research to make the events meaningful. All this research I really enjoyed because it took me back to my student days in CFL and FLU, where I had to get the facts quite right, because it's one thing to say and another thing to write, so you had to be very correct. I now realize that I left out some very important events while I was growing up, such as that of police action in 1948. And how did the police action affect us? How my 2 older siblings, my sister and my brother, would break the curfew, because the curfew was imposed. So they would go out in the curfew for a walk. The police were very strict, but when they saw these 2 people going, they thought they were lovers. So they let them carry on. It was dangerous, of course, because planes were flying overhead, planes of Sidney Carton, who would bring armaments for the Nizam's army, for the police action, and they would fly overhead, just where the checkpost is. They would go low, and then there was a place where they would land and take out all these arms, and there were underground tunnels, and they were sent onwards by them. So thank you very much, Uma, for letting me talk about Hyderabad, and thank you for inviting me to the Lit Fest. And I would like to thank you, all of you, and say Jai Hind. Okay? 20 minutes?
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you for keeping such perfect time, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah. And thank you for your lovely talk. And now we know where the expression Jai Hind comes from also. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay.